Welcome to L&D Disrupt, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome workplace challenges and prepare for the future of work today. I'm your host, Nelson Sivaharan, and I'll be speaking with the movers, shakers, and path breakers in L&D who are reshaping their organizations right now. Join us each week as we delve into the highs and lows of work in the industry to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff that you actually care about. You're the first ever L&D hire in a startup, and you have a complete blank slate to work with. But where on earth do you start? Artheka Sivaharan, the learning and development lead at MyTutor, was in this exact position just a few months ago. Listen to the episode to hear exactly how Artheka handled the situation as she shares her best tips for growing L&D from the ground up. So today we're going to discuss, how do you go about launching your L&D function, right? So you're a high growth company. You haven't really thought about L&D up until now. You've decided now's the time for you to bring someone in to own this part. Before we go into the how, I wanted to ask you, when do you know is the right time to bring in an L&D person, right? What are the kind of telltale signs before you think about bringing someone in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, I didn't have to make that decision in the company that I'm in right now. I was the person that they brought in. But I know that some of the drivers behind it were, number one, like the scale. So once you get to around 200 people, there's quite a lot of demand for learning and development. And I think if you don't provide that to colleagues, you tend to see attrition reduce, so like more people leave and they look for other opportunities purely because they're not getting the development. So I think the size of the company, but also how quickly you're scaling has an impact. So if you can see that you're growing rapidly, you know that you need to invest in someone to potentially provide those like learning and development interventions. So I think those two things, like the current size and then the speed at which you're scaling, are like two big factors to look at when you're thinking, do I need someone to do L&D as a focused area now?
So day one, you join as the first L&D person. Where do you start?
Yeah, it was very interesting because I think I started by just finding out like what the company already has. So I looked at they already had a little bit of training on different things. So I looked at the learning and development folder that was existing. I was given warnings like don't expect magic and things like that, because obviously they'd all put things together as and when stuff was needed. And I think for me, like I knew from the moment I joined, my priority was going to be just speak to as many people as possible, get to know as many people as possible, because like regardless of like what they do, so not just management. I think typically people go in and sometimes they go, I'm just going to meet all the managers. I wanted to get to know like just everyone, because at the end of the day, everyone's going to be at the end of the solutions I provide. So I want to know what like their real problems are. And I honestly spent my first few weeks just working out what the problems were. So what are the pain points in the company? I know that when I do that, I'm not necessarily going to be able to provide solutions to everything, but it's good to sort of know so that you can map out like, what does my first year potentially look like here? So it does really help. But yeah, just talking to people and getting to know what's already out there and what the actual need is.
And do you find, given being the first L&D person, are you getting a bunch of course requests, right? The kind of classic status quo is, here's someone where I can say I need course A, B, and C, and they'll go get it for me. How do you kind of shift the conversation where it's not about them kind of self-prescribing things they need and they actually articulate what the problems are and you can understand what the root cause of it is? How do you direct the conversation in that way?
Yeah, you do get a lot of that. I think for me personally, so my company that I work at now, they already have like an L&D budget request form. So people can request what they want to use their L&D budget on. So prior to me, that's the kind of L&D investment that the company had, which we still have. And I think it's great. So when I first joined, everyone thought, okay, she's the L&D person. So a lot of individual requests were coming to me about courses and things like that, just like you said. The way I tackled it is we're not like a marketplace. Like I'm not just there to go and pull different learning for them. So initially it was only like a few requests. Let's say like 5 people approached me about different things. I actually booked in time to speak with the 5 people. I know that's not always feasible in like larger companies, but in this instance it was doable. And I did a bit of coaching with them. So I asked questions around like what specifically they're looking to develop, why they want to do it, what value they think it adds, all of those sort of things. And I think what it helped with is, number one, sometimes the course they were asking for was actually a really good solution in the short term. So it was something that we would support and they could carry on doing. In other instances, it was things that I had already identified, like leadership, for example, is a hot topic at the moment in my company. And a lot of people want to develop their leadership skills. And I already have leadership stuff coming down the line. So it was kind of addressing like, is it immediate? Is it like an immediate need, or actually can it wait a couple of months? Because we're going to have loads of in-house stuff. And yeah, my background, like where I worked before, we did basically like 90-something% of our like learning and development in-house. So I'm used to developing like L&D solutions for loads of different things. So I knew we could do loads of things in-house. So it was just kind of promoting that, reassuring them that it's coming. We launched a couple of different things for the company. So I've launched like PDP training with the help of my colleague. So people can already see like, okay, something's being done and it's coming. And that really helped as well, because it just meant people like just put a pin in it for now, and they thought I'd rather do the like MyTutor way of doing things, so it's more specific to like my needs and all of that sort of stuff. So I think it's assessing it, because sometimes when they come to you and they want one specific thing, it can actually be the right thing. I think don't dismiss it, but listen to them, ask some questions and find out if it's the right thing to do.
And how do you communicate, what is L&D there to do in a company that's never had L&D, right? I'm sure people are sitting there listening to you when you first got to the company going, yeah, but what's in it for me? How are you actually going to help me? So how do you kind of position the value that you're going to bring as L&D?
I think you just you basically just do a sales pitch for yourself. You advertise yourself. Going along to team meetings, I met quite a lot of the bigger teams in the company just to introduce myself and what I'm there to do. But in any like general situation, I think the best thing to do is kind of really identify what your roles and responsibilities are, and then share them with people so that everyone's like, it's really clear, it's really transparent, like this is what we're here to do. And I think I was very clear in the message that it's not an order taking system, it's more collaborative. Like I want to work with the business, I want to work to align like the L&D objectives to the business's objectives, and I made that very clear. But I think communication is the way you do it, just open, honest communication, and also not being afraid to challenge people. Not just in a new organization, in any organization, you get stakeholders who will push back and maybe say things like, I think this should be the solution, but that's the L&D person's job, like to come up with a solution. But what the key stakeholder can be involved in is everything up until then, to like really work collaboratively. And I think if you communicate that that's each person's role and responsibility right from the start, it makes a big difference to ongoing conversations.
So I can imagine when you had your first conversations, you must have had a long laundry list of problems that people needed solving, right? Once you've had those conversations. So where do you start, right? How do you decide which problem you're going to take? And once you decide on that problem, what are the next steps?
Yeah, I like to use a few different things. I think one of the biggest things that I like to go off of is how people are feeling. So like qualitative data. Surveys, asking people for feedback, like you said, the conversations, the focus groups around what the problems are. A lot of the time, what that tends to do is show you patterns in terms of what the gaps are, what's really missing, what are people craving, like what's their appetite. And then the other thing is just like normal data. So one of the things I looked at when I joined, we plan to scale quite quickly. So I wanted to kind of look at our projection, like where is the direction of employees going, because that will really help me to shape out priorities. And I could see that a really large proportion of our colleagues were going to sit in like leadership roles. So they're either directly line managing someone or they're leading through others. So I knew that that was, one of the things that should be high priority. And then it was nice when the feedback matched up to say that actually people who are new to leadership feel like they could really use that training. And then it was kind of pairing it up that way. So using a bit of like, a mixture of data to sort of work out what are the priorities, but really just listening to people, just really getting to know people. Sometimes they think that a certain thing is a problem, but it's just a symptom of the actual problem. And you need to kind of do a deeper dive to get to the problem. So I think it's just talking to people and really understanding their needs.
I love the kind of use of data there. Is that the maths degree coming in handy?
Yeah, it definitely is. Love a bit of data.
As a side note, it'd be interesting to know how much is the kind of maths and stats kind of helped you with how you approach L&D? Because as you know, data in L&D is an ongoing conversation that keeps evolving, but how has it helped you?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like prioritization, kind of using data to set initial, like how you're going to measure success, but then actually evaluating the success of your programs, I think my like ability to use and like navigate around data does really, really help. But I think really and truly where it comes in handy for me is when I'm building business cases, because I think when you can present data, a lot of people like facts, right? They like to see like numbers, they like to see what progress can look like. So I think when you're building business cases and you could put some evidence in to support what you're saying, it really helps you to kind of get sign off and approval on different things. But yeah, outside of the data aspect, my maths degree only comes into use when there's like quizzes and there's like a maths question and everyone looks at me, can you answer the question? But yeah, I think data is a huge part of L&D. I don't think we use it enough. I think we should use more data in learning and development to really drive what we do for the business.
And just in terms of diving into that kind of business case angle a bit more, I imagine, when you're kind of building out your early solutions, when you're new in the organization, getting that kind of stakeholder buy-in across the business, what was your approach there in terms of pitching that business case and putting it forward?
So in terms of the business case part of it, I like to just put together like a bit of a proposal. And in the proposal, I usually outline like a bit of a summary as to what's driven me to look into this and what sort of things have come to my attention that drove this project. And then I'll basically break it down into like what I'm seeing in the business. So that might consist of people's feedback. It might be data that we're seeing. It could be like simple things like your retention rate and potentially like linking that into exit interviews and all of that. So kind of presenting the evidence. And then my next thing is like proposing what we do about it, but it's not, I don't include the solution in that proposal. The proposal is more, I think we should get together and have conversations about what we do and all of that. And the reason for that, and I definitely learned this the hard way, but the reason is I think if you do all the work ahead, come up with a solution and then present it to stakeholders, a lot of the time, because you're not the subject matter expert, they typically are, you tend to like get gaps and you miss stuff. And sometimes I'll just turn around and be like, this solution is just not feasible in my business area. So from an L&D perspective, it's like perfect. But then from a business perspective, it's not something you can do. And I think that's why, like, once you make the initial proposal and the business agrees, this is something we should look at, you then get together that project team of key stakeholders and you work with them from the very beginning. And when you like get them involved right from the start, you've got early engagement. They become your salespeople when you're launching as well. They'll be the biggest advocates of the project. And you also like avoid going back and forth so many times because you've taken into consideration all their concerns and all their problems when you're building the solution. So you know the solution's fit for purpose. And I think that's, for me, the approach that's worked best.
So the business case gets signed off, you're ready to start building out solutions, collaboration. How do you go about developing your solutions?
So I tend to, I do a lot of mind mapping. So I like to put down like what the problem is. So I always start with the problem, write it down in the middle, and then kind of go off of that what I potentially want to do. So typically, like if I've got a problem, then I might think of, I don't know, 5 to 6 areas that I think are like the next leash, like they start to solve the problem, like what are they? And then I'll like build those out deeper. And in like the planning stage for me is probably where I tend to spend the longest time, because I think if you get that right, the rest is like quite easy to build. And then once I know, like, okay, so let's say, for example, let's say I'm doing something on coaching and I want to introduce people to different types of coaching. I would basically look at, right, what do I think is the best way to deliver this? Like sitting people in a classroom is not always, the winning solution. And I think it's we've gotten to a stage where lockdown sort of forced us to think out of that mindset, because you can't have people in a classroom. But it's quite good to think about, what are all the different ways I could cover this? And then I tend to choose the one that I think will be most effective, but then I'll make that decision. Like, I'll make a decision as a recommendation. I'll present it to the project group and say, this is what I'm thinking. This is why I think it would be good. And then I'll get their challenges and their feedback on it, so that if they don't think it will work, they can tell me. But in that instance, I think telling people what the different types of coaching are, talking at them, doesn't necessarily work. You need to, you need to potentially read, you need to focus, maybe videos. So I would probably do like a bit of an article that, or like a interactive e-learning that introduces people to the different types of coaching, their benefits. Maybe a person like doing a video talking about how the different types of coaching have helped them in their career, both as a person being coached and as the coach. And that's how I would build that one out. So once I've like decided, right, this is what I want to do, present it to the project team, make sure they're happy with the concept. And if they are, then I'd build it out and do it that way. And I like to build in sprints. So instead of trying to do like one big bang of, here's like an entire thing end to end that you can do, which is great. Like if I used to have a massive team in my old company, and it's something that you can do. But at the moment, it's just me and one other girl called who is brilliant, but she's new to L&D. So I'm still teaching her how you do certain things. Right. So where it's just two of us, launching in sprints is the way forward, because the business gets like little modules of learning. They constantly feel developed, but you also don't put the pressure on yourself to deliver massive projects in one go. And you don't feel like you're working on something for months on end before you can launch it, because you actually get to launch small snippets. So,
That's great. And in terms of the sprint planning process, do you have where does that come from? Where did you get kind of inspired to use agile sprints in the approach? And how has that, I guess, changed the way you use feedback that you get from the wider team, right? Like you said, you're probably releasing more often and gives you more of an opportunity to get feedback. So how has that changed what you do?
So I think in terms of how it was introduced to me, it was actually my old manager who introduced the idea of working in sprints, and I literally fell in love with it immediately, because up until that point I was feeling quite overwhelmed with the number of projects I was managing and the scale of them. They were really large. So like the sprint working methodology came from him, and then a previous colleague of mine introduced me to like more agile ways of working and project management in that sense. I think in terms of how it changes the way I work, it just means that you do have to be organized in your planning. Love a good Gantt chart. So I'll have a Gantt chart that sort of shows the different stages. And then like if the 4 stages I use in a project for each small part are like plan, build, launch, and evaluate, then I'll build those out into the Gantt chart. But what will happen is typically there'll be some overlap between one module and the next module, because we can start building one whilst the other is being launched. And in the evaluate stage, like I'll just make sure that I have focus groups, I have surveys going out, I'm speaking to the stakeholders to see what engagement in their business area is like, and all of those different things. But I find it works so well, because as long as you stay on top of it, it's okay. If things don't go to plan, you shift things along in the Gantt chart and you make it work. But I think it definitely helps, because the stakeholders know when things are coming, so they can get their areas excited. But for you also know like what your deliverables are. So I know that I need to deliver X by this date. And if I know it's not going to happen, I speak to the stakeholders to say, look, we need to push this back.
So you launch a program and you're going to evaluate. So going back to when you were putting the business case together, you're capturing this data around, qualitative data around problems and, like you mentioned, kind of churn and retention, etc. So what's your approach to kind of evaluating to then kind of compare, did you deliver on that business case? How do you know you're having an impact on the business?
So a lot of the things that I'm going to evaluate, I actually set out right at the beginning of the project. So during the planning stage, so just after the proposal, a lot of that data that becomes your sort of baseline data. Right. So that, right, this is where we started. So that that's what you're going to compare to at the end, and make comparisons to. I think what I like to do as part of like the training needs analysis part of it is identify what are the key metrics we're going to measure at the end. Like what actually does success look like? Right. I think a lot of the time people, let's say like the training is a leadership course. The measure of success, sometimes people will just say, oh, it's that I can lead a team. And it's like, yeah, that is a measure of success, but it's not like the specifics. What can you do specifically as a result of going on this training or completing this program?
Right.
So it might be, so if it is leadership, it might be that actually all the colleagues in their team have PDPs that are actively being worked on, right? It could be that the retention in their team goes up because people feel like they're being led in the right way and they're being empowered. It could be that on an employee NPS survey, they're feeding back to say that they feel supported by their leader. And there's loads of different things. Actual like measurables. Yeah, I think a lot of the time, like people measure success really subjectively and be like, I'll feel confident coaching. It's like, but what does that confidence look like? What does that actually mean? Or presentations, example, a lot of people will say, I feel comfortable presenting, but I think there's a difference between feeling comfortable presenting and being good at presenting. Like you can feel comfortable and be doing an awful job, and you just don't know it. Or, you can be really, really good. And for something like presenting, it might be the feedback that you get from people to say, I thought you did a really good job. I thought you landed those like key takeaways really well. It was really clear throughout. So feedback is a big one, but yeah, it does vary from project to project, but I think making sure that you decide what success looks like right at the beginning, ask that empowering question, if you knew tomorrow that managers are doing the best job leading their teams, what skills do they have that have made them able to do that? And then working backwards from that, and then, comparing at the end.
That's super useful, Artheka. What can say we've got founders and other leaders listening to the show, and they're thinking about bringing in their first L&D person. What can they do to make sure they're setting up that L&D person for the best chance of success? Right. What are some of the things other people in the company can do to make sure they're supporting and helping the L&D person deliver value to the business?
I think the person who the L&D professional is going to line into, like that manager having really clear sight of what they're expecting from the person before they join is really important. Right. Even though there might not be an L&D professional, like my manager, for example, he doesn't have a L&D background. He's our head of people, but he knew that there were certain things that he wanted me to achieve as a result of me joining. And he was really clear on that. He had worked with senior leaders across the business to work out what that looks like as well. That really helped me because it gave me sort of the guidelines when I first started to be like, okay, this is what I need to do. Another thing I think really helps is it sounds silly, but like getting a bit of hype for the person that was joining prior to them joining. So in my new company, my manager, he had literally like told so many people that like, this person's joining, they're going to be at L&D like lead. When I joined the company, people were really excited to meet me, and it was really nice because I thought, wow, like these people like are really engaged with their learning and development. And I think for me, it made conversations easier because people already knew, like, I'm coming in. They knew what I was coming in to do. So they were so much more like open, honest, and transparent in the conversations we were having because they just knew, like, if I don't know the problem, I can't really help. So they were open at sharing problems. So things like that. I think the business just like driving a bit of excitement around the fact that L&D is going to be a focus is always a massive thing. And I think that can help the person coming in as well to just feel the love a bit more, feel like it's easier to talk to people and just start jumping in head first and getting things done.
Love it. An internal PR person to hype you
basically.
up. Love it. We're now going to go to my favorite part of the show, which is the quick fire round. So I'm going to fire some questions at you and you can give me a relatively quick answer. Are you ready?
Oh, let's do it.
So how do you learn?
I always find this question quite difficult to answer because I'm one of those annoying people that learns in a billion different ways. I can't learn continuously in one format. Like I do really struggle with that. So every quiz I've ever taken like gives me like a rainbow of distribution when it comes to how I learn. But I would say I like blended learning. So I like a variety. If I'm learning about a particular topic, I like to watch a video on it. I like to, listen to a TED talk or a podcast. I like to read a little bit. So maybe an article or a book. I like a bit of training if it's relevant, then a bit of like virtual classroom training. But yeah, it also depends on the subject. Like, so when I was doing my master's degree, the way that I learned was just to practice continuously. So repeat, practice, like build my understanding that way. But I think regardless of the final method that I learn in, I think for me, I need to know why I'm learning it. If I don't really know why, or like I don't feel passionate about the why, nothing's going to happen. Like, it's just not going to stick because I don't understand what's the point in me doing this. Why bother? So that's kind of what I try and identify first before I start anything.
What do you know now that you wish you knew at the start of your career?
I wish I knew that all learning doesn't have to happen in the classroom. So for years I was like, yeah, classroom is the way forward. I think like my previous organization, because we did so much learning in-house, a lot of it was classroom based. So that's how I got into L&D in my previous company. So all I knew was like a lot of classroom until my last few years there, when we started becoming a lot more blended. And I think I wish I had known that there are like just so many different things you can incorporate, even though we used to occasionally, have a video or like a podcast in it. It wasn't like a blended pathway. But if I had known that sooner, I think a lot of the solutions I've created throughout my career would have been so much more engaging and so much more like better in terms of the results we achieved.
What's the one skill you think someone in L&D definitely needs today?
I think I would say like adaptability, especially now, like over the last few years, it's become just that much, like it's just invaluable. Being able to adapt to like changing environments, to rapid scaling, to being told, one day that you're working on one thing and then the next day that it's no longer a priority and there's something else, and like not being disheartened, but that resilience and that ability to adapt, I think is absolutely key.
What's the one skill you would like to develop and why?
I'm constantly looking to develop my stakeholder management skills, because I think as you like progress through your career and you meet different stakeholders, different seniority levels and all of that, it's always something that you can never be too good at stakeholder management. I think you can always better the way that you work with people and that side of things. So yeah, stakeholder management, relationship management, that's what I would continue to develop.
What's the book that you recommend the most?
I think I would recommend, I really like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I found it like really insightful. It really helps me with like my different approaches, especially to relationship management, funnily enough. So things like creating a win-win, like takeaway situation, starting with the end in mind. It's a book that it doesn't matter what field you work in, you can actually apply it to your life, which I think is great. But as an L&D professional, I actually found it really helpful in my day-to-day.
And my last one for you, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think I'm most proud of the journey that I've like been on in general and where I'm at today. I think I've definitely like put in the hard work to get to a point where I'm able to like lead and help other people in their L&D careers, which is like something that I absolutely love. But yeah, I think I'm just proud of like how hard I've been willing to work in terms of getting to where I am and building my knowledge. Like, it hasn't been easy. There's been so many steep learning curves, but it's like every part of it's been worth it.
Artheka, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And just like that, Artheka makes it sound so easy. I think it's really useful to have the process for building a business case being broken down like this. And hopefully it resonates with you if you're facing similar challenges right now. As always, you can find our contact details below. Please make sure you subscribe to be notified of future episodes. See you next time.